Thank you all. Fantastic speeches and nice and short. We're going to let this run another half an hour, so we've got plenty of time. Can I see a show of hands from those who might want to ask questions of our panel today? Please don't be shy. Thank you. Okay, so there's a few, enough to keep us going anyway. I will come to you in just a moment. I've got a couple of things. And anybody can answer these, but the questions I have been raised first by Julia, and I've written them down in order. How does or how could a change in drug laws help create the kind of opportunity for young people that might not otherwise have it that you were talking about?
Well, I suppose that's the big kaupapa that we're all here talking about, but we know that young people are part of the vulnerable group of people who are processed through our system and are targeted in ways, because we young people feel our public spaces are the ones that are visible and present and are the ones that our justice system can access and touch, particularly if you're brown. If we Kylie was talking about it this morning, that actually the laws themselves, if they're inherently structurally biased, the problem actually comes to how they're implemented as well. I just want to touch on, Nicola, you just said a point about how our numbers of young Māori being processed through our youth justice system has decreased. And in real numbers, that is true, but the disproportionate processing has increased. So we've seen actions taken around how, particularly police in the front line, about how they can do things differently, and a lot of that comes down to discretion, and we've saw that the disproportionate representation of Māori in our youth justice system being prosecuted through went from 40% and now is over 60%. So that disproportionality is growing. I think the changes in law doesn't change how the law is implemented, and that's where there's a struggle, but it will reduce those real numbers, and we know that the law can have that impact, and that we need to do that, because if we don't, then nothing's going to change. So we need to do something. It's not going to be perfect. The laws, there are a lot of people working on the communities making the difference on the front line, but if the laws can support those kinds of works and approaches, then we're going to reduce those real numbers. But it's a longer conversation. It's like, how do you fix colonisation and racism in this country? It's really hard.
In terms of increasing opportunity, I don't know if it necessarily increases opportunity so much as it decreases, the fact that people are losing opportunity.
Removes the roadblocks.
Yeah, and further, obviously, with a criminal conviction, you're less inclined to get things like a lease on a rental property, you're less inclined to get a job, all of those kinds of things. So to give an anecdote, I've got a friend who's a stripper in Auckland, and one day at like 4 p.m, a guy came to the bar and he was wearing this ill-fitting suit, ordered himself a whiskey, and she went and talked to him because he was the only guy there. And it turns out that this guy had just gotten out of prison, young guy, and had went and bought a suit and gone to a strip club, because that was his idea of masculinity. That's what he thought that men did. And I think that, again, that is a loss of opportunity for that man, insofar as he hasn't had the opportunity to flourish in his community. Instead, he's been taken out and put in prison and had a distorted view of the opportunities that are available to him.
Does anybody else want to? A couple of you talked about evidence, Nicola and Kiri. What kind of evidence are we waiting to see? And I'm not saying that as a pejorative. How would you want the evidence presented, and how do we tackle the issue that's scientific, which this was highlighted yesterday by one of our keynotes. How do we tackle the issue that scientific evidence is hard to come by when these drugs are illegal? And I suppose at present, and I suppose what I'm trying to get at there is international evidence okay, or does it have to be local, which will be harder to come by?
So I think there's a couple of things there. I think the first thing is, when we're talking about any reform in a regime, we can't just talk about the law, because the law is only a starting place. We need to talk about all of the supports that need to be put around a reform to the law. So what would it take for a reform to the law to be successful? Well, it would probably take a totally cross-sectoral approach. Changes in health, changes in education, changes in social policy, changes in income support. I don't think it's as simple as just changing the law. So that's the first thing. I would want to see evidence of a holistic approach to any change that would ensure there were the supports in all parts of our community to make it change successful. The second thing is, in terms of international evidence, I think we're actually at a really interesting moment in history, and that there is a lot of reform happening around the world. And we have an opportunity to see how that reform goes and to look at that evidence and think about how it would apply in a New Zealand context. So yes, I think international evidence is relevant, and we have an opportunity to really examine closely how these changes in offshore regimes go, particularly across the criteria that matter to us as New Zealanders.
Yeah. Look, I think we've been very fortunate over the course of this week. We've got the former Deputy Prime Minister and Health Minister that, led the reforms in Canada, so we can learn a lot from the Canada experience, from the American experiences. We've got our colleagues here from Australia sharing their experiences. I think for me, it's not just evidence and seeing all the data and the details. What I want to see is really well-rounded solutions that have been thought through and developed by all of the relevant stakeholders. So, I want to see our addicts in the same room as our, doctors and our academics. I want to see that kind of collaborative working there. I also think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of our parliamentary infrastructure, in terms of us working cross-party to create solutions, So I think it's a two-tier thing. One, there might be a lot of collaboration going on that I'm not aware of, and again, I'm not an expert in this area, but those types of things that are actually driven by all of the relevant stakeholders, I want to see that. What kind of solutions work?
Thanks, Kiri. Kiri, if I can stay with you for a moment, you are one of the only ones so far at the conference that's talked specifically about meth. Would a regulated market for all drugs, including methamphetamine, which is acknowledged as on the upper end of the danger scale, be helpful, bearing in mind that all of us are here to ensure that we reduce harm?
Interesting, because I think that really, things like our dependency on methamphetamines, and others of you have focused on cannabis. For me, actually, I really want to look at why. Why are our families becoming addicted to substances, And for me, when I look around my community, I've got a 10%, just shy of 10% unemployment rate. There's nothing for our families, our communities. There's not a lot going on up there, right? I compare that with the 1970s when we had it was a pretty good time for the coast. We had almost nil unemployment. It was almost full employment up in our areas. I look at my DHB, Tairawhiti DHB, in our psych department. We've got 5.2 full FTE positions in our psych department. We can't fill them. We've got a mental health system that's completely overburdened, and we can't fill 5 positions up there in our rural New Zealand. We have got absolute substance addiction abuse, so we've got absolute mental health issues that are skyrocketing out of our community's control, but we don't have the resource. We heard David Clark talk yesterday, $1.3 billion been ripped out of the health system. It's almost like we're looking at things from the wrong end. If we plug these gaps in terms of, the social inequalities that are existing for our communities, why isn't that our starting point? This kind of conversation here about regulation of the complete drug market, that to me, I'm probably quite far away from thinking that that's even a starting point for the real needs for my community. Will that reduce harm? I haven't seen the case for that yet.
Thanks, Kiri. Okay, let's take some questions from the floor. Can I have your hands up again? Oh, look, and I need to apologise that I've had my back to this side of the room for quite some time. I do apologise, don't mean to be rude. At the back there.
I promise it'll be an easy one this time.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I just bought a couple of...
Hold the microphone up like this, please.
A couple of you brought things home a little, and I think everyone in this room, there are people here that we represent that we've lost in the work we do, that will never have a chance to have any input into this. And all it is really a request. You mentioned losing parts of members of your family, that we give up a minute of our lunch break for a minute of silence to remember those people who, through overdose, through suicide, or through any number of other things, are not with us here today to actually take part in this.
That's a nice thought. I'll take it under advisement. There was another question over this end. Yes.
Kia ora, my name's Chloe King. Kiri, I just wanted to acknowledge I understand what it's like to have a family member who becomes addicted to pee. It was part of my family as well, so just want to know, I know what that feels like, so thank you for sharing. Also want to pull on, I guess my question is around like more holistic approaches to addiction. We actually do have some pretty good models in this country. One in Auckland is Te Puna Whakatā, which I just came out of, and so my question is, like, how much longer do we have to wait till we have those conversations around more holistic approaches to addiction, and why are they not happening in Parliament, and where is the funding for those places? Like, and if we're going to fund those places, why are we not also talking about funding more peer support workers? Okay, people with lived experience are in the best position to be advocating and fighting and supporting people who have addictions. I have an addiction to alcohol, I'm in recovery, and just having that care, that love, being told that I'm worthy, being treated with dignity, even though I do have an addiction, is so vitally important. So can we discuss that? Can we discuss more funding for peer support workers, all of that? Yeah. Kia ora.
You know what? You all should listen to Talkback Radio more often, is my observation, because, we hear that we all live in a bubble with our Facebook feeds and our Twitter feeds these days. I don't get that opportunity. I hear from everybody on a daily basis, and every time this kind of topic comes up, I get those people. I don't tend to get the academics, although we do save time to interview them, but I get exactly those people. Yeah, good question. Over to the panel.
Couldn't agree with you more, mate. Fund our health system and fund it better.
Tēnā koe e hine mō tō pātai. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I suppose it's about priorities and where we're putting money. I absolutely agree. We need to be putting money in our preventative, our community, our grassroots services, because maybe we would stem the flow. From a criminal justice perspective, it's really frustrating to see that we're investing billions of dollars at the ambulance end of the cliff. We are building a new prison. We've invested another 1,800 beds. We're encouraging double bunking. Hurts my heart when they say 1,800 beds, because I know 1,000 of those are going to be Māori. If we spend $100,000 to keep one person in a prison bed, knowing that they're in a university of crime because they graduate and they come back, because when they get released out, they haven't got much going on. I had the privilege with Dr. Tracy McIntosh last night to get to hear from whānau who are, the stuff we're talking about is just like life. It's just day-to-day life, that they have to exist in communities with no money, helping whānau on drugs, helping, they have to do the do. They have to raise their kids in that space. And one of the quotes that just hit me in my face, just a normal conversation, we're having a cup of teas, we're talking, was just, people think that going to prison is the hardest place that you can ever go to if you haven't been there. The hardest place is the hardest place is not being in prison and staying out of prison. The hardest place is surviving outside. And that's just a sad reflection on our society, that we've seen prisons as a place that we are going to invest housing our people. We're spending 5 times more on prisons than in social housing in the latest budget that's come out. We spend over $1 billion every year to keep our prisons going. That doesn't make sense. We should be putting money in our frontline services. We also know that for a lot of our short-term people who are going in, like Roimata and Tracy said, are there for short terms, and they're not given access to programs. I know for my brother, he just had to finish a 12-week program, drug and alcohol program, and it was good. He said, his feedback was like, oh, it was actually really useful, and then it just stops. And then how's he meant to do it? Every single day he has to choose not to drink. Every single day he has to choose not to smoke pot. Every single day he has to wait on the medical list. He wants to get his leg chopped off to address the pain that he's feeling so that he can walk every day. I mean, yes, we need to reinvest our money. We've talked about social justice reinvestment. Why aren't we? Prisons are our ambulances, and that's where we're putting money, and we need to be putting money more into those preventative services.
I'd like to share the sentiment of the man who spoke up earlier, that we should acknowledge the pain that lots of us have experienced with our family and friends who've used drugs, and I really want to acknowledge Kiri for sharing her story. And I also want to acknowledge you as a questioner for working on your addiction and making progress, and acknowledge the progress that Kiri's sister has made too, so that's really positive. So I start with that, but then I can't let go Kiri saying that there's been a cut in health funding. Can't let it go, because it's not true. Health funding has increased from 11.9 billion to 16.7 billion. That's around about a $5 billion increase. And before you ask, because it's a good question, has it increased in per capita terms? Yes, it has. So even adjusted for population, health funding has increased. So I like facts, and if we're going to work in a cross-parliamentary way, we have to have facts on the table. So in the budget this year, there was a significant increase to mental health funding, acknowledging that in New Zealand and in countries around the world, we are seeing an increase in people who require the support of mental health and addiction services. Now, to your question, which was around, can we be trying more holistic approaches? Can we be trying new approaches that we know work better? I think the answer is absolutely yes. In this budget, there was not just an increase to the mental health services that are already there. There was $100 million put aside into a special fund, which is designed to be a cross-sectoral fund. So not just a health fund or a justice fund or a social fund, but a fund that can cross all of those dimensions in assisting people with mental health challenges. And so I think that's a really positive move, and I want to see some wonderful programs coming out of that that build on the successes we already have across so many of you and your work. So actually not prepared to put up with anyone saying that there's been cuts to health funding. There hasn't. We're making progress. We need to continue to make progress.
Kia ora, Chloe. I'm not sure if you were in the room before when I acknowledged you. Yeah, I spoke exactly about that. And just with regard to the cuts, I'm not sure as to how it's been pitched in terms of the terminology, but my understanding is that it's a $1.8 billion shortfall in the funding that's actually required.
You're wrong, Chloe, I'm afraid.
Going and talking to people who are on the front line of these services, all of them tell me that they are desperate for resource. And all I can speak to is those anecdotes. I mean, numbers are what we in this kind of space, in this bubble in Wellington, talk about a lot. But, you know, those who are actually on the front line need the resource to be able to do their mahi. With regard to that, I was speaking to Deb earlier, and she works down south with youth with mental health issues and I believe potentially addiction issues as well. Yeah. And she's experienced a 5% shortfall in funding despite the fact, well, a 5% cut in funding despite the fact that she's been ticking all of the boxes above and beyond in what she's been providing with her service for young people. So there absolutely is an issue with resource, and the infrastructure is there. The infrastructure is there. It just needs to be resourced. Politicians are not the ones who are on the front line, so we need to be supporting those who are.
So I didn't pluck those numbers out from the sky. You know, that was a well-funded report that was produced on how much the health system is currently underfunded right now. Now, up in my electorate, and I've door knocked on about 8,000, my team and I, about 8,000 homes. I've gone into social service after social service after social service. Every single one of those social services has told me they have not had a funding increase to deal with the over-demand that they're currently dealing with right now since 2008. Most of those social services will tell me that they have had their funding cut consequently every single annum. They are working, the people on the front lines that are working with families like mine, like many people within this room right here, We see these, one, I see the environments that they're working in. Two, I see the stress after they've been 9 years without resource. I see it in their face, you see it in their, just the whole demeanour. In the social service sector right now, and it makes you, I come home from this new thing that I'm doing as my job. I don't get emotional in my commercial law job. I come home, I feel tired and I cry a lot because of the intense, impoverished circumstances that our frontliners are enduring and all throughout my electorate and no doubt all throughout this country. So I don't accept that the current system is being funded adequately. I do accept
Kiri. I think we're going to have to stop there.
At the back there.
We promise.
Now those people up the back, I want to acknowledge all of those people up the back in that people group. There's over 3,500 people in that group. They do it without funding. It's by them, it's for them, and it is getting results. So I want to acknowledge you guys, but they're depleted. They need help.
Kia ora. We promised we wouldn't do this, funnily enough, didn't we? Chloe, I don't know whether you feel that your question's been answered adequately there. Oh, she's happy, so that's good. Another question over here.
Kia ora, hi. I do feel really nervous and emotional about this because I come from lived experience as well. I'm not young and I'm not Māori, but what I hear is people take drugs and alcohol to get away from the impoverished circumstances that they're in. When Julia said there's more prisons being built, that really broke my heart because like Chloe, I have benefited from having money put in where I could have been in the criminal justice system. And I was lucky to have the support and the words to actually ask for help from the Pākehā health system. So I was diverted from a criminal justice result. And I think, you know, saying that we need new initiatives, we've actually got all this peer support workers out there. We've got people like you young people that know that it's not an old, that it's not a new remedy, it's an old way of just caring for people. And if you could divert some of that money that's in the criminal justice to build more prisons, I go into the prison and I hear the women telling me that if it wasn't for the circumstances that they were in, they wouldn't have gone out to find money in illegal ways. They wouldn't have been prostituting, they wouldn't have been selling tinnies, they wouldn't have been taking meth and dealing it to provide themselves with money for their whānau. So it doesn't even seem like, it's just like a no-brainer to me. You know, we really need to listen to what these young people are saying and find better ways of spending our criminal justice money on health. And
Kia ora for your story. Do you have a question?
no.
Can I say
Right,
something in response to that?
Sure.
Just something that I learned through acting in the Waitangi Tribunal claim that I talked about earlier. It was about 4 or 5 months after we had gone and had the hearing last July, and you know, we'd talked all about how the problem with once Māori go into prison, they're cycling in over and over again, and we had all of these amazing experts give evidence. Julia was there, gave very passionate evidence as well. And what happened was the government announced another, was it 1.8 billion? So a couple of billion, I think. Anyway, 1,800 more prison beds, and it seemed like a real slap in the face. It seemed that more money is going in the wrong, into a system that we had just spent a week hearing about how it was failing Māori. And that was a big blow. And I think that part of the one thing that I learnt from this process is that it's quite easy to get caught up in distraction of all different areas that impact on an issue, and certainly that was the Crown's approach to the claim. We were focused just on corrections because we could show that corrections was failing in terms of its rehabilitation obligations to Māori. But the Crown's response was very much to talk about this is what we're doing in education and health, and this is what we're doing with the police. And it was, in many ways, sort of a strategy of distraction. But what I learnt from some of the other groups who supported the claim was that we do need structural change, but there's also more than one way to skin a cat. So at the same time that we were doing that claim, Just Speak had a campaign about bringing up the age so that 17-year-olds were included in the youth justice system. So from 16, wasn't it? Yeah. So what that reflected, what that meant was that there's another slice of our young Māori who don't go into the corrections system, and in the face of sort of what felt like a bit of a defeat, there was the victory there. And I was quite interested in coming to this symposium because it's another example of looking at another way to skin a cat that I hadn't really thought about before, that changed in terms of drug laws and looking at who goes into the system. Actually, it means a big deal for how well our corrections system can work. And of course, the other side of it is that there's savings in terms of what we spend on people who are in prison, and also in the policing of our laws. So,
one more question, one or two more questions. Please make them questions. Yes.
I'd like to ask the panel. Ross, thank you very much if he's around somewhere for.
He's
for
not in the room at the moment.
He's gone, has he? Yeah. So my question to the panel is simply this. There's an undertone of organised crime right throughout this country with gangs. This measure that's being proposed by the Drug Foundation and sounds to be supported by this group sitting in front of us, how do you expect that is going to eliminate the organised crime in behind the scenes? It also, for me, I see that this mechanism is going to take another 3 years. So there's going to be a lot of academics sitting around the table doing exactly what they've done for the past, 20 odd years. So can you tell me how you think this particular route is going to eliminate organised crime? And we all know that it's all the gangs around the place. So please, if you give some understanding of that.
I can't remember who spoke of it yesterday, but whoever it was said that we are never going to eliminate organised crime. They will always find an avenue. So, as long as things are illegal, they will find an avenue. I think it's really important to acknowledge that, if we're talking about the Portugal model, at the same time that they decriminalised, they drastically increased funding for support services. And that it cannot happen in isolation, decriminalisation. So I think that it's really crucial that happens holistically. And that's really, unfortunately, all I've got to say on that one.
I think other people can speak better than me in response to that. Matua, do you want to respond?
Gangs are always getting blamed for everything. That's how you made your laws today in New Zealand, okay, through the gangs. But gangs always get blamed for everything. Okay, that's how you made your laws today in New Zealand, through gangs. You got to realise everybody's involved in methamphetamine. There was 2 waves of methamphetamine. And yes, the gangs did get involved in the first stage of methamphetamine when it was all cooking and that. But the second wave of methamphetamine is the importing stuff, which everybody's involved. And at the end of the day, who gets rich from all this? The government is all about the structure, not about the people. Now, even though everyone's blaming all these people selling all these drugs and that, who's getting all the money? Car yards, motorbike shops, okay, jewelry shops, shoe shops. All the rich are getting all this money back. Okay, all the people living in poverty just want to have a feel of what it's like to live that life. But what they don't realise is the damage that it causes, and it wasn't worth to go there. You know, so this is why we need the prevention education. We've been trying that for a while. So that's my answer to that. Methamphetamine, once it gets into a country, it comes into the country only for one reason, and this is actually to destroy your culture. Nothing else. Destroy everything. It's not going to go away. So you can put hundreds or millions and thousands like you have been to the police force and nothing on the cause of the problem, and that's where it's got to change.
Are you saying that methamphetamine has to be, in fact all drugs have to be involved in the decriminalisation or legalisation equation and the money redirected? Is that what you're saying? Doesn't address organised crime.
Okay, well, to answer to that, you know, it's like, why has government has only come out after 3 decades admitting that it's a problem when it's the evilest drug in the world? They've just come out 4 months ago before John Key stood down. That was our biggest hurdle. Now, if you talk to addicts in that, if they were educated, okay, they wouldn't have put it in their mouth in the first place. So what we're trying to do is fight the war on the other end, because it's not going to go away. So we've got to teach people and all that not to bring it forward. Okay, that's what we're all about. At the moment, thank you for acknowledging us. What we do is we start in walk-ins. We've started a few in New Zealand and that. This is addicts working with addicts to give back to society. Okay, we don't get funded. The 3,500 on the page is all about people that need help. Is where they go to, because at the end of the day, it is harder to stay off than it is to get clean. And as for a lot of rehabs and all that, most of them don't work. We're all different kind of cultures in that. A lot of things have got to change. But my problem is governments only leave issues like methamphetamine out of the light if there's a hidden agenda. And to me, the hidden agenda is the rich get richer. Don't matter who you blame.
Thank you, Mātanga. And thank you so much to our panellists. Really grateful for your time and your expertise and your thoughts this morning. It is time for